measure other things, whether it's how much did this shirt cost, or how is exchange going? How do you do bills and have debt? Another one is medium of exchange. And, this is probably a little bit self-explanatory because we use money to exchange with other things all of the time. And to me, it's pretty related to the store of value, because you can use money to purchase things not just immediately, but also in the future. So you can retain, if you did your job today and you get paid for it, you can retain some of that value and use it towards goals or goods or services that you have in the future. So this is a very high-level, common way that money is discussed via these three different types of approaches. But in my mind, it all comes down to trust. It comes down to trusting that, okay, I can offer this service today, but then I trust that I'll be able to either immediately purchase what I need, or in the future be able to purchase what I want, or interchangeably need and want. So it all comes down to kind of trusting in a system. And so if we take a little bit closer of a look, what are we trusting? So with gold, we're trusting that there is and will always be scarcity and demand. So it's scarce because it's a natural resource that only occurs in a finite amount. And we trust that there will always be demand, that people will want gold, so it is valuable. With dollar bills or digital money, which digital money is really the predominant way that we use money in this day and age, the normal ones, we're trusting governments and banks. We're trusting that they know what they're doing in terms of how much they supply or how much they remove from the supply. We're trusting that my bank isn't going to just like accidentally wipe a database record and then say that I'm totally broke. I'm trusting that they're holding that number properly, or that I can use it when I want. So we're really trusting a central organization that has many different limbs, but we're trusting that they know what they're doing and that I will be able to use the money that I see, the money that I've accrued in now or in the future or whenever I need it. And for the most part, for many people, this works really well. For me, I've grown up as an American citizen, and the financial system has served me quite well. I'm able to transact when I need it. I'm able to save my money. My finances have never been wiped unexpectedly. But there's lots of ways in which we see this kind of breaking down in our world today. And this is just like highlights of different headlines, though they're kind of superficial, but it just gives a taste of what we're trusting and what the edges of that are. So a few years ago in India, the Prime Minister just made this surprise announcement that certain kinds of high frequency notes, like bills, would just be taken out. And that was to prevent use of black money, but that's the kind of power that is possible with the government. Or we see headlines like Zimbabwe elderly bear the brunt of 700% inflation. And we see dollar bills that get printed in really large denominations. Over in South America, we've heard about Venezuelan hyperinflation or Argentinian hyperinflation and the economic crises that are occurring there. But don't get me wrong, we got plenty of problems in America as well. And especially this past year, the government has money printed in unprecedented amounts of money. And there's a lot of concern of what does this mean in the long term? What kind of impact will this have? And so there's a lot of questions of, okay, this money has served many people. This money continues to work quite well. But what happens when it doesn't? What do you do if it's not working for you? What do you do if the bank isn't willing to provide you a service? And so there's an alternative model, and that's the focus of our discussion today of what is it like when you don't actually have to trust a central entity, but instead you get to verify that every transaction is meeting a set of rules that you've agreed to. So Bitcoin is digital. It does not have the physical existence that some of our monies like gold have. Bitcoin is global, which is really interesting because this is the first digital and global money.
Hi, the person you're about to speak with has call captions turned on. They'll see captions of what you say to help them listen along.
Okay, cool. So Bitcoin is global. And so this is the first truly digital global money that I have seen, because most of the currencies that we've had are either like associated with a particular nation state, like dollars or rupees or bolivars or whatever. And the one that is truly global, gold, is physical. And so that obviously has some issues in our global society. Bitcoin is inclusive, and I'll talk a little bit more about how I see that later, but a big premise of Bitcoin as a system is kind of the opposite of how banks and governments work. Banks and governments work because they are very careful about who they trust and who they allow into the system. Whereas Bitcoin says any entity should be able to participate, and that is a first principle in the Bitcoin system. And yeah, at the end of the day, Bitcoin is money, and I think it has the potential to be the best money. And I think for many, it is a better money than what they've already, like what they're exposed to in terms of alternatives. So I'll talk a little bit about me, and then we'll talk about how any of that works. Cool. So I grew up in the Bay Area, and I went to Carnegie Mellon University in Pennsylvania. And then I came back to SF, and I was working at some various startups. And during my time in the startups, I really noticed the focus on consumerism and hypergrowth and these different themes that are kind of prevalent in tech, but also in our general society. And one of the startups I worked at was a platform for bartering services. And I really, really loved the product. And it made me wonder, what is wealth? What does it really mean to be wealthy? And it became very apparent to me that the answer to this goes far beyond money. On this platform, it's called Simbi, you could barter services. And so I got to experience kind of these perks just by being a participant of this platform, which was open to anybody, absolutely, like no US dollars involved. You could just offer your services and receive it. But I was doing things like getting free massages and learning how to poach a chicken from a chef, or just kind of these different services that people wanted to offer. And in trade, I was sharing things that I'm passionate and familiar about. I was sharing like my experience with meditation, or I taught all sorts of people how to get started with yoga because they were so overwhelmed with the millions of classes. I was like, okay, I'll just give you a 10-minute thing you can practice. And so in many ways, the people who are participating in this ecosystem were kind of like living beyond their means, according to the classic financial system or US dollars. Like I was getting all sorts of services that I would not normally be able to afford. And it really made me reflect on the US dollar and the kinds of ideas that it's supposed to capture, but how convoluted it's become and how much extra baggage that there is, and how money doesn't really match up with wealth anymore, or maybe it never did. And it really hit me when I realized that historically we've only ever had two trust models. One is direct. I get to know you, you get to know me, we can build trust. we can have debt, we can do business, we can make future promises. And the other one is hierarchical, which is that I put trust into a system and that system gives out trust. And so that's really what's allowed our society to scale to the size that it is today. Whether it's a company that you work for, or how Airbnb works, or how you make financial transactions using your credit card, like every model of scaled organization that we have kind of revolves around this hierarchical trust model, where you can say, great, I trust the school, I want to go there, and then that extends out because they decide to trust others. So historically, we've only really seen two trust models play out. And with Bitcoin, when I learned about it, I was really amazed at the potential, because this is introducing an entirely new trust model. It's saying that you can come to an agreement about what happened, aka who paid how much to, like, who has how much money and who paid how much to other people, without having to trust one another. So what? How is this possible? It's a really radical idea, and it's unlike any systems that we've seen. And that just really intrigued me of what are the implications that this could have on our global society? What are the implications that this could have on what it means to actually be wealthy? Because right now, the people who, if I go back a slide, the people who sit on top of that hierarchy, they're the ones who profit the most, very disproportionately to the people who are actually providing services. Like tech is an example of this, whether it's Airbnb and Amazon, where people are offering their house to other people, or people are offering their products to other people. The ones who really are able to profit on this and become extremely wealthy are the companies themselves, or the people running the companies. So in this decentralized model, it really compelled my curiosity of what could this mean for our society if we have this new trust model. So now I contribute to Bitcoin Core full time. I'm sponsored by two organizations, BitMEX and OKCoin. I focus on the peer-to-peer layer, and I really care about the dev ecosystem and onboarding more people to contribute. And like building community and getting diverse contributors are all things that are very important to me. So that's a bit about how I fell down the rabbit hole. Now for this next section, I'm gonna dive into the technical fundamentals. And there's essentially two concepts that I want to communicate. So we'll start with part one of private keys. Cool. So I'm going to talk about the idea of public key cryptography, which sounds scarier than it is. The idea here is one that we're familiar with. If you have a house, then you have an address, and that's separate than your house key. Your house key is something you keep private. Your address is something that you can give out to people. Not too readily on the internet and stuff, but to friends to send you mail. And so in this digital technologies, it's very similar, where your public key is your address and your private key is something that you keep entirely to yourself and you keep it secret. So this essentially allows people to send you mail. You give out your address, they're able to send it, it will get to you, and you're the only one who has the keys to open up the box and see what's inside. So this a key idea that we need to learn of how this is possible is one-way functions. So the idea here is, imagine you have two tubs of paint. One is pink and one is blue. If you mix them together, it's really